It was supposed to be just another night on Jimmy Kimmel Live. The lights were bright, the studio was packed, and the cameras were rolling. The opening jokes were sharp, the audience laughed on cue, and everything seemed as usual. But no one, neither the viewers at home nor the crew backstage, could have guessed what was about to happen next. Karoline Leavitt was not listed as a guest in the teaser promotions. Her name wasn't on the lineup, and yet, as the second segment began, the announcer introduced her. The applause was hesitant. A few cheers, but more murmurs. Some audience members looked at each other, confused. Others took out their phones. Karoline walked in wearing a sharp navy blazer, hair tied back and eyes focused. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She sat down across from Jimmy Kimmel and folded her hands calmly on the desk. Karoline Leavitt. Jimmy began with his usual smirk. Former White House aide, rising political voice, and Twitter's favorite villain. Welcome. The audience laughed. Karoline gave a small nod. Thanks for having me, she said flatly. Jimmy leaned back in his chair. We talk a lot about truth on this show, he said, grinning. But your Twitter feed reads more like fiction. Laughter again. But this time, Karoline didn't. Blink. Maybe your audience prefers jokes to facts, Jimmy, she replied smoothly. But I'm here to represent people who feel silenced by elites like you. The laughter stopped. The studio grew slightly quieter. Jimmy raised his eyebrows. Not out of fear, he thought he had the upper hand. He replied, voice laced with sarcasm. Ah, yes, the elite cabal of late-night comedians. Ruining democracy one punchline at a time. Some people in the crowd chuckled again, but it was weaker now. Karoline leaned forward. It's not about jokes. It's about the fact that every night on shows like this, you mock people who are trying to survive. People who work two jobs, who care about tradition, faith, their country. You don't make fun of the powerful, Jimmy. You make fun of the forgotten. Jimmy's face changed slightly. Smile didn't fully return. Do you mean the half of America that thinks the election was stolen? That vaccines are tracking devices? That climate change is a hoax? The crowd laughed louder. Almost nervously this time. I mean the half that's tired of being told they're stupid for asking questions, Karoline said firmly. The half that's tired of being labeled dangerous just because they disagree. Energy in the room shifted. It wasn't funny anymore. It felt like something else. Like a standoff. Like something that shouldn't be happening on this stage. Backstage, the crew was whispering into headsets. A producer motioned to the floor manager. One camera operator stopped zooming and just held still. Jimmy tried to cut the tension with humor. Karoline, maybe you should host the show. You clearly have the script. She looked at him directly. The problem is, there's never been a script for people like me. We've always had to fight to speak. That hit harder than expected. Even in the audience, a few people didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Jimmy shifted in his seat. "'Kay," he said, trying to lighten the mood. "Let's get back to something fun." But Karoline cut in. "No, let's not pretend. This is fun, you joke. But millions of people listen when you call them backward, when you call them deplorable, when you laugh at religion, family, values. I criticize hypocrisy." Jimmy interrupted sharply. "Not faith. You mock people for believing in something other than what your writers feed you," Karoline shot back. "You're not questioning power, Jimmy. You are the power." Then, off mic, a faint voice echoed into Jimmy's earpiece. It was the producer. "Cut the segment, move to commercial." Jimmy stood up. "I think that's enough for tonight," he said, trying to laugh it off. "We'll be right back, folks." But Karoline stayed seated. Double quotes. "No, you don't get to cut the mic when it gets uncomfortable," she said, rising slowly. "That's the real issue. You invite us here for show, not for substance. And when someone challenges your narrative, you panic." Two crew members approached awkwardly. One gestured toward the curtain. The audience was frozen, not laughing, not clapping, just watching. Karoline looked out at them not with anger, but with calm certainty. "Ask yourselves, she said quietly. Why are you okay with only one side of the story? The screen faded to commercial. Behind the scenes, nothing faded. Within minutes, the clip was online. Someone in the booth had leaked the footage before the network could sanitize it. It spread like wildfire. Hashtag Leavitt storms off started trending within 30 minutes. Then hashtag Kimmel meltdown. Then hashtag media bias exposed. Conservative influencers called her a hero. Progressive voices said she hijacked the show. But even those who disagreed with her couldn't look away. In homes across the country, people were replaying the clip. It wasn't just a talk show anymore, it was a spark. And the fire had only just begun. The clip of Karoline Leavitt standing her ground on Jimmy Kimmel Live spread faster than the producers could react. Within 2 hours, it had over 6 million views. Hashtags like hashtag Leavitt storms off, hashtag truth on late night, and hashtag Kimmel collapse trended across every platform. In conservative circles, Karoline was hailed as a modern-day warrior. Headlines read, Karoline speaks for the silenced and the night. The mask slipped on mainstream media. On liberal media, she was painted as disruptive, attention-seeking, and dangerous. But something felt different this time, not just online noise. There was a strange silence from ABC. The official YouTube channel delayed uploading the episode. Some viewers noticed. The version broadcast later that night was edited. The most explosive moments were gone. That only added fuel to the fire. Late that night, Karoline held an unscheduled press conference outside a quiet hotel in Westwood. A dozen cameras lined the sidewalk. She stood alone at the mic, wind blowing through her hair, still in the same navy blazer from the interview. I was invited to speak, she said, voice steady. But I wasn't invited to tell the truth. When that truth became inconvenient, they tried to shut me down. One reporter asked if she regretted storming off. She looked straight into the lens. No, I regret staying as long as I did. As she walked off, a man from the crowd slipped a folded piece of paper into her assistant's hand. No one noticed except one nearby photographer. Back inside the hotel, Karoline opened the note. It was brief. You touched something real. Be careful, Jay. She stared at it. No name, no contact, just a warning. At the same time, in a dark control room inside ABC Studios, senior producer Lena Hoffman was reviewing raw camera feeds. Not the edited broadcast, the uncut version. Multiple camera angles. Karoline's eyes, the audience reactions, the exact moment Jimmy froze before the cut. She didn't look angry. She looked afraid. Her assistant walked in. Corporate. Legal wants you. Lena shut the monitor. Tell him I'm off tonight. She wasn't. Instead, she opened an encrypted browser, connected a USB drive, and uploaded a copy of the uncut segment to a private server titled roguefile_Leavitt Kimmel. By morning, copies of the uncut footage had already leaked through independent blogs and whistleblower sites. Some clips included audio from the control room. A panicked voice yelling, "Kill her, Mike! Kill her, Mike!" The story was no longer just about a guest walking off. It had become something else. News anchors debated the meaning of the moment. Was Karoline playing a role? Or was she peeling back a layer the media tried hard to keep hidden? In Washington, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Inside a quiet room beneath the Capitol, Senator Raymond Briggs met with 2 aides. From the Senate Media Oversight Committee, the door was closed. No cameras, just facts. She mentioned the deplorable narrative, the targeting of rural voters and media gaslighting, Briggs said. And the reaction from that studio told me something. Which is? One aide asked. Briggs looked grim. She hit a nerve. Back in Los Angeles, Karoline was being followed. Her communications director noticed the same black SUV in 2 different locations. A call to the hotel confirmed no security had been assigned to her. Her team started documenting the sightings. They didn't trust the police. They didn't trust anyone. That night, Karoline received a second message. this time slid under her hotel door in a sealed envelope. Inside was a screenshot. It showed her segment on an internal network dashboard used by studios to track emotional impact, viewer sentiment, and political alignment in real time. The caption read, "This wasn't just TV. It was a data test. And your words broke the model." She showed the note to her senior aide. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "It means they didn't expect someone like you to spike both sides of the chart." She stared at the screen. The lines were clear, left and right, blue and red. Her words had triggered emotional spikes in both directions. Outrage, empathy, anger, curiosity across party lines. Wasn't supposed to happen, okay? And now someone wanted her quiet. The next morning, her flight back to D.C. was delayed twice. Her team grew more nervous by the hour. But Karoline refused to cancel her next move. She had already accepted an exclusive one-on-one with Natalie Surrey, an award-winning investigative journalist with Global Post. Natalie wasn't known for bias. She was known for cutting deep. They met in a neutral location. No cameras, just a recorder between them. Natalie didn't waste time. "Who told you to bring up the media's role in psychological influence?" "Strategies?" she asked. "No one," Karoline said. "But I was in the White House. I've seen memos. I've seen the reports." The hotel room was quiet, but Karoline couldn't sleep. The recorder from her meeting with journalist Natalie Surrey sat on the table, still blinking red. She hadn't played it back yet. She wasn't sure she wanted to. What she had said during those 2 hours, what she had confessed, felt bigger than politics. It felt like crossing a line no one came back from. A soft knock broke the silence. Her aide Evan stood at the door with his phone in hand. His face looked pale. "You need to see this," he said. He handed her the phone. A video was playing. It wasn't from a news network. It was a deep web upload, low quality, grainy, and clearly filmed in secret. A man in a dark suit, face partially hidden, speaking to a group in a conference room. The caption read, "Leaked internal briefing. Damage control strategy post-Leavitt broadcast." Karoline watched in stunned silence. She weaponized relatability, the man in the video said. The demographic overlap was unpredicted. It exposed the vulnerability of satire when faced with sincere populist rhetoric. Someone off camera asked, "Do we take her down publicly or silently?" There was a pause. Then, silently. "Publicly gives her a platform." Evan looked at Karoline. "It's not just backlash. Strategy." She felt her throat tighten. "They're not fighting my ideas. They're erasing my voice." A knock interrupted again, this time louder, more urgent. Karoline moved to the door. Evan tried to stop her, but she opened it anyway. Standing there was Natalie Surrey, the journalist. "Your phone's compromised," she said without greeting. "I didn't text or call. They're tracking you." Karoline stared. "Who's they?" Natalie stepped in, locking the door behind her. "Not the government exactly," she said. "Not entirely." She pulled a laptop from her bag and opened it. A map popped up on the screen, red dots scattered across the U.S. "Each dot is a coordinated feedback loop," Natalie said. "Media?" "Stories, late-night comedy segments, influencer tweets, even TikTok trends. They feed data into one another, emotional reactions, public alignment, resistance zones." Karoline sat slowly. "This is a system." Natalie nodded. "Built for narrative control. Designed over decades, and you disrupted it live." She brought up the clip from Jimmy Kimmel again, this time overlaid with heat maps of real-time reactions. "When you said the line about people laughing at religion and family, there was a 4-second delay, then total silence. Across demographics, both sides." Karoline whispered, "It wasn't supposed to work." Natalie leaned forward. It worked too well. They sat in silence. Then Natalie said something unexpected. "I used to work for them." Karoline's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Natalie tapped the screen. "Not just the media. The architects, The ones who feed data to networks, design talking points, draft push-pull narratives. They call it Project Meridian. Karoline had heard the name before, buried in footnotes during her time as a White House communications assistant. Back then, it was brushed off as a think tank and analytics firm that supported public trust. Natalie continued. Meridian didn't just track opinions, shaped them, controlled heat zones, predicted uprisings. When satire lost control, when sincerity cut through, they panicked. Karoline folded her hands. And now I'm a variable. They want deleted. Natalie nodded. Exactly. Just then, Evan's phone lit up. No signal, he said. Wi-Fi too. The screen of Natalie's laptop flickered. Then it went black. They weren't alone. Natalie stood, her voice calm but firm. We leave now. Karoline grabbed only her essentials. They exited through the hotel's service door into the alley. A black SUV idled across the street. When Natalie noticed, she veered left, leading them behind a row of dumpsters toward a waiting rideshare she had booked with a burner phone. They got in. The driver never asked questions. Natalie gave directions in code. As they drove through Los Angeles, Karoline watched the city's lights blur past. Everything looked normal traffic. People, laughter from a restaurant window. But underneath that calm, something dark pulsed. She could feel it, see it now. Not conspiracy, not fiction. A system, one designed to keep voices like hers in the margins. At 3 a.m., they reached a small journalism cope just outside the city. Natalie had friends, their off-grid reporters, former intelligence analysts. Whistleblowers hiding in plain sight. A man named Reyes greeted them at the door. Former CIA, now writing under a pseudonym for an underground site called The Channel. I saw the Kimmel tape, he said. Didn't believe it until I ran facial response analytics. Cracked? The barrier. Karoline didn't speak. She didn't know what to say. Ariz looked at her. They'll say you're lying. They'll say you're dangerous. But some people are finally listening. Karoline stared at the ceiling for a long time that night. Then finally whispered to herself, what happens when too many people wake up? She didn't sleep. Because the next morning she was going to D.C. And this time, the cameras wouldn't be turned off. Washington, D.C. looked different now. Karoline stepped out of the car and stared at the Capitol building. Behind her sunglasses, her eyes scanned the marble columns, the tourists, the snipers on the roof. It all looked calm quiet, but her heartbeat told her it wasn't. Natalie walked beside her, holding a file wrapped in plastic. Inside it were documents, real ones. Copies of data logs, meeting memos, internal scripts from the Project Meridian servers. Some redacted, some not. A man in a gray suit waited at the steps. He wasn't security. He wasn't a senator either. He was a liaison for a group called Statesman 3, a quiet alliance of former congressional staffers and intelligence officers who believed the system had slipped too far. He introduced himself only as Nolan. We'll keep it quiet. One entrance, basement level, he said. As they moved inside, Karoline remembered something Jimmy Kimmel had said on stage. Apparently, I triggered a revolution. At the time, it had been sarcasm, but now it didn't feel like a joke. Inside a cold room with no windows, a screen lit up. On the other end was Congressman Ethan Park, once a rising Democrat from Oregon, now considered a centrist voice who had drawn fire from both parties. I saw the Kimmel segment, he said without introduction. Then I saw what followed. You're either very brave or very stupid. Karoline didn't blink. Or maybe just not afraid anymore. Natalie handed the congressman's aide a drive. It has the original Meridian playbook, she said. Scripts written to control public reaction to headlines. Targeted emotion triggers through satire and influencer loops. Ethan nodded slowly. We've always suspected. But no one's ever brought proof like this. Karoline leaned forward. It's not just late-night comedy anymore. They're shaping elections, narratives, wars. Ethan's voice lowered. You're saying this isn't just media manipulation? It's psychological governance? Natalie replied, it already is. The room was silent. Then Ethan stood. There's a closed-door hearing tomorrow. Intelligence oversight. I'll get you 5 minutes. Karoline raised an eyebrow. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It's forever in that room, he said. But after that, you'll be exposed. They'll know you're coming. When they left the building, Natalie's phone buzzed. A private notification. Alert. Unusual spike in flagged keywords. Subject. Karoline Leavitt. Source. Homeland Echo Database. Karoline checked hers too. A new article was trending. Leavitt unhinged. Former White House staffer spirals into conspiracy. The photo showed her mid-sentence, eyes wide, taken from a bad angle. The caption read, "A face of extremism." They're rewriting the narrative already, Natalie said, but Karoline wasn't angry. She smiled instead. They're scared. They returned to their safe house. It wasn't much a basement with old carpet and buzzing lights, but it was hidden. There, Reyes was waiting with a guest. A woman in her 60s, sharp eyes, government posture. Her name was Marcia. Used to be National Security Council. Reyes whispered. She left after 9/11s, said the playbook changed. Marcia laid a single manila folder on the table. This is what you're walking into tomorrow, she said. Inside were names. Senators, lobbyists, consultants, all flagged. For alignment maintenance by Project Meridian. Some had delivered the same phrases on 5 different networks. Some had even worn matching colors on specific days. Karoline felt her chest tighten. This is scripting, she whispered. It's orchestration, Marcia corrected. The show you walked off wasn't just a show. It was a node. One of many. The goal is never to change mindsets to numb them. You've jolted the system. Lee was flipping through pages. And the pushback we're seeing is just the first wave. Reyes leaned forward. They won't try to silence you next. They'll try to overwhelm you, drown you in noise, discredit everything you say. Karoline nodded. I don't need them to believe me. I need them to listen. That night, she rehearsed her testimony for the committee, not with notes, just with memory. Her voice, her story. She remembered her first job in the White House, the paper cups, the rushed meetings, the internal emails where they joked about managing democracy with emojis. At the time, it was funny. Now, it felt terrifying. In the final hour before dawn, Karoline looked in the mirror. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like someone trying to be heard in a room where no one listened. But she had come too far to stop now. At 8:15 a.m., she stepped into the Capitol again, past reporters, past staffers, past eyes that whispered and stared. Inside the oversight chamber, cameras were off, but every word was being recorded. Karoline looked straight ahead as the red light on the microphone blinked to life. Across from her sat 11 members of the Intelligence Oversight Committee. No cameras, no media, only sharp eyes, cold water glasses, and legal advisors murmuring. In the background, quiet voice announced, "The committee recognizes Ms. Karoline Leavitt for a 5-minute statement." She took a breath not to calm herself, but to prepare for war. "You've heard the jokes," she said. "You've read the headlines. But let me tell you what I've seen because it isn't funny." Silence. In 2022, during my final 6 months in the White House Communications Office, I was assigned to a project called Meridian. I believed it was a data operation audience analytics, but it wasn't. She slid a small folder across the table. It was message alignment. Behavioral engineering through comedy, pop culture, even children's programming. Words and emotions were tested in digital labs before reaching a host's mouth. Late-night shows were not reacting to the news. They were delivering IT pre-framed. Pre-spun, a senator leaned forward. "You're accusing U.S. entertainment networks of psychological operations?" "I'm not accusing," she replied. "I'm confirming." And they weren't acting alone. The room stiffened. She reached for another file. Foreign consultants were involved, some with ties to London think tanks, others to tech labs in Singapore and Tel Aviv. This wasn't about America's enemies controlling our media. It was about everyone realizing that the most powerful tool in modern politics is laughter paired with shame. Another senator interrupted, skeptical. Why come forward now? Had a platform for years. Karoline met his gaze. 'Cause I was a coward. I played the game. Told myself I was helping people until I saw how it crushed the ones we ignored. Then I went silent. I regret that. Someone coughed. A pen clicked. The air felt heavier than before. Chairman Ellis finally spoke. We'll take a recess. This merits internal review. Karoline nodded, but knew what that meant. Delay. As the room emptied, Congressman Park approached quietly. That went better than I expected, he said. Worse for you, though. How so? He looked over his shoulder. 'Cause now you've said it under oath. They'll come at you differently. Outside, the sun was too bright. Reporters weren't allowed inside the room, but word had already leaked. One journalist from The Atlantic approached. Did you really say Project Meridian influenced the media script? I did. He raised an eyebrow. On the record, under oath. That was all she said. No spin, no buzzwords. Back at the safe house, Reyes was waiting. He'd hacked into a private signal thread used by entertainment executives and communication strategists. The chatter was loud. One message stood out. Contain her before Friday. She gets international. Prez, it's over. Natalie looked up from her laptop. You're trending in India now. And Poland. The clip of you telling Kimmel there's never been a script for people like me just went viral. Karoline sighed. I don't want this to be about me. I want people to see the machine. Reyes frowned. That's the problem. You're the perfect symbol now. It's easier to make you the story than to face what you exposed. Suddenly, there was a knock. 3 times. Slow, deliberate. Reyes pulled a gun quietly. Natalie stepped to the side. Karoline moved toward the door and opened it just a crack. The woman on the other side wore a brown coat and no makeup. Her badge peeked from her pocket State Department. My name is Jillian Roth, she said. I'm here unofficially. They let her in. She walked straight to the kitchen table and placed a flash drive down. I have 24 hours before they realize I took this. It shows Meridian's international branch what they call echo streams. It's worse than you think. Karoline picked it up. Why are you helping us? Jillian didn't hesitate. Because I wrote the first Meridian memo back in 2017, and I've watched the system evolve into something I never imagined. If someone doesn't stop it, there won't be a next election. It'll just be one narrative. Karoline's hand trembled for the first time in days. Natalie spoke. What's on this drive? Could get us blacklisted? Jillian nodded. Or dead. But Karoline looked determined again. I didn't storm off that stage to become famous, she said. I did it because we've been asleep. And I'm done sleeping. She stood, holding the drive. I'm going to London. Everyone looked at her. That's where the tech lead is, she said. The one person who knows the entire Meridian algorithm. He's disappeared, but I know where to find him, Natalie whispered. You're escalating this to a global level. Karoline gave a faint smile. No, they did that years ago. I'm just catching up. Outside, a black van passed the apartment window, slowing slightly. Inside, the team packed. The war had moved beyond a stage or a soundbite. No, it was a race between truth and time. Its plane touched down at Heathrow, just before dawn. Rain hit the runway like static, fog hugging the terminal lights. Karoline stayed quiet as the cabin emptied, her eyes fixed on the seat in front of her. She hadn't slept. Reyes met her at the arrivals gate, blending in with the other travelers. No briefcase, no weapon, just a plain coat and a tired face. Did you bring it? He asked quietly. Karoline nodded and held up a flash drive still sealed in the State Department evidence pouch. They exited without luggage, heading straight to a black sedan parked in a dim corner of the lot. Inside, Natalie was at the wheel, scanning local traffic frequencies on a handheld device. "There's chatter already," she said. "British surveillance teams were alerted. You've triggered diplomatic alarms." Karoline looked out the window. "Then let's not waste time." Their destination was a forgotten block in Southerquance, a government annex, now an abandoned tech testing facility. But underground, buried behind layers of false records and shut down funding trails, it was still operational. They reached the gate. Reyes pulled out a magnetic key one acquired years ago through quiet channels and slid it along the lock. The door buzzed open with a groan. The corridor inside was freezing, lights flickering. "This place was used by the Psychological Insights Directorate," Natalie explained. "They helped design Meridian's Echo Filters algorithms that sort content by emotional volatility, not accuracy." Karoline's footsteps echoed. Down to more flights of stairs, they found the server room. Terminals blinked in standby mode. Dust danced in the glow. "This is where they trained the first AI model," Rhea said. "The one that could write jokes, draft tweets, even simulate public outrage." Karoline sat down and inserted the flash drive. Lines of code appeared. Then files, then a name. "Dr. Adrian Holt." She leaned forward. "He left the program in 2021, claimed moral objections, then vanished." Reyes scanned the notes. "According to this, he's under watch by MI5, but they list his location as redacted." Natalie clicked through metadata logs. "Not redacted. Hidden in corrupted metadata. Typical MI5 overconfidence." Moments later, she read aloud. "Coordinates. Small village. Kate Karoline stood. We go now." But just then, the lights cut out. Total darkness. A second later, backup red lighting hummed to life. "Emergency systems." Karoline froze. "They know we're here." Reyes pulled his phone. "No signal. Jammers are up." Footsteps echoed. "From above, measured, deliberate. Out the back," Natalie said. Now, they raced down a secondary hall as the first door upstairs slammed open. Shadows moved quickly through the main corridor. The trio ducked into a ventilation shaft, crawling silently through rusted ducts. At the far end, they dropped into a gravel tunnel used for utility repairs. As they emerged into the night behind the complex, Karoline looked back just once. Black-clad figures entered the building. They had just left officials or mercenaries. She couldn't tell. "Time's running out," she whispered. They disappeared into the city. 2 hours later, they arrived at a sleepy cottage in the hills of Kent. Mist blanketed the fields. Sheep grazed quietly in the distance. It looked like a painting, peaceful, untouched. But Karoline knew better. Reyes knocked once, then twice. The door creaked open slowly. Dr. Adrian Holt was thin, older than the file suggested, with white hair and shaking hands. He wore a thick sweater and had the look of someone who hadn't spoken to people in months. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "They'll find you." Karoline stepped in anyway. "You built the machine," she said. "Now help us shut it down." Inside, he poured tea and set it on a cracked wooden table. He pulled out an old laptop wrapped in a dish towel, powered it on, and entered a password slowly. "What they told you about Meridian," he began, "is only the surface." The screen lit up with schematics, massive digital web patterns, color-coded emotional triggers, metadata pipelines across borders. "It doesn't just track sentiment," Holt explained. "It shapes it. The algorithm is sent to hundreds of host TV, streaming, YouTube. It decides what people find funny and what they find dangerous." Karoline sat down. "And if we expose it?" Holt looked up, dead serious. "They'll erase you." She leaned forward. "Then let them." "Try." Suddenly, Natalie's phone buzzed. One message, no name. They traced the drive. Me-5 coming now. You have 14 minutes. The private plane touched down in Geneva at 3:42 a.m. Karoline stepped out onto the tarmac, exhausted but alert. Her coat still held the flash drive. Reyes walked beside her, eyes scanning every shadow. Natalie stayed behind in London to delay. The response from MI5 Dr. Holt, too old and fragile for another chase, had given them everything: data, proof, names. Now the burden was fully Karoline's. A black van waited at the terminal. Inside sat a tall man in a navy suit, ID badge clipped to his collar. Lucien Charvet, UN Information Security Division. He didn't smile. "We have a narrow window," he said. "We can't confirm what kind of surveillance is on you, but Swiss intelligence was alerted when you crossed French airspace." Karoline held up the drive. "It has everything." Project Meridian's real purpose. It's linked to media systems, election interference, culture programming. Lucien nodded. "The press body meets in 2 hours. You'll have one uninterrupted 12-minute window to speak." As they sped toward the Palais des Nations, Karoline rehearsed her words silently. But she didn't need a script. She would speak the way she had on that stage with Jimmy Kimmel, clear, blunt, and unforgiving. At the UN complex, they passed 3 layers of checkpoints. Security was heavier than usual. Reyes looked at Karoline. "They're expecting trouble." She just replied, "Good." Inside the main press hall, journalists were already seated, representatives from Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC, NHK, and others. The energy was strange, curious, but tense, as if people knew something unusual was about to unfold. At 5:06 a.m., Karoline walked to the podium. Flashes from cameras flickered across the room. She adjusted the microphone. "My name is Karoline Leavitt," she began. "I was invited onto a talk show last month to be mocked. I walked off. And I haven't stopped walking since." The room fell silent. "I come here today not as a politician, but as a witness. I have uncovered evidence of a multinational operation called Project Meridian, an artificial intelligence system not built to entertain, but to influence." She plugged the flash drive into the provided terminal. Screens around the hall lit up, flowcharts, images, metadata logs, files stamped with markings from American, British, and EU intelligence branches. It does not matter whether you are left or right. What matters is that your perception of each other is being manufactured through media streams. Selective censorship, targeted emotional content. This is not conspiracy theory. This is digital architecture, built over years. Hidden in plain sight. A few gasps from the crowd. Lucien stepped forward, speaking into his earpiece. "They're blocking our broadcast." Karoline didn't stop. "They call this safety. They call this progress." Quay? When governments begin controlling which emotions a citizen is allowed to feel, it is neither. She turned to the camera. "If I disappear tomorrow, you'll know why. But if you're watching this, please don't let it disappear with me." Suddenly, alarms sounded. A UN official ran into the hall and whispered something into Lucien's ear. He turned. "Pale, Interpol just issued an emergency injunction. Swiss authorities are being pressured to detain you." Reyes was already grabbing her elbow. "No time." Karoline turned to the reporters, still standing, stunned. "I've emailed each of you a copy of the files. It's with full encryption keys. Do not let them be buried again." Then she ran. Out the side entrance, into the garage. The car engine was still warm. They sped into the Geneva dawn, chased by vehicles with dark glass and government plates. 47 minutes later, at a rural safe house near the French border. Karoline stared at a laptop as the footage played again. Every news station was silent. BBC ignored it. CNN claimed unverified material. Twitter flagged it for context. Only 2 networks aired it in full, one independent Canadian outlet and a South Korean media watchdog. But within hours, the clips went viral. Mirror uploads flooded the web. People began to ask, was the news real? Were emotions being manipulated? And what else was being filtered? In the weeks that followed, a dozen whistleblowers emerged. Former engineers, low-level contractors, even a retired EU commissioner. Karoline stayed underground, communicating through encrypted channels. But the world had already changed. Congress launched hearings. The EU demanded audits. Media networks scrambled to defend their systems. Comedians who once joked about politics started staying silent. Reyes asked her one night, was it worth it? She looked at him. Not yet. But we just kicked the door open. In one moment, one stormed off stage, one flash drive. One microphone left Liv Karoline had revealed something larger than herself. Not a scandal, not a program. But a truth most people weren't ready for. That what we believe isn't always our own. And that sometimes it takes one voice refusing to be silenced to break the system wide open.